In today's video, we will learn two things. First, we will learn how to take a sustantivo, that is, a noun, referring to a person, place, thing, or idea, and how to take that singular noun and make it plural. So instead of referring to one item, such as a singular taco, because who just wants to eat one taco, we can talk about multiple tacos in Spanish, and so on. The second thing that we'll talk about is a grammar rule related to how we have to introduce sustantivos, that is, introduce nouns, persons, places, and things, in Spanish. So let's begin with learning how to make a word plural in Spanish. So first we have to notice the terminación of the noun. The terminación is the ending. So if the ending of a noun is a vowel, all we have to do to make it plural is add the letter S. So for example, if I start off with one taco, I can make it plural by just adding an S to say tacos. Here I have the word traje, which means suit. But I don't want to just have one suit. I want to have multiple so I can be fancy on different occasions and mix it up a bit. So I know that this ends in a vowel. It ends in A, E, I, O, or U. So since the terminación is a vowel, again, I can just add S. And now I have trajes, multiple suits. Next we have silla, that's what you sit in. But if we have many students in the class, we will need multiple sillas. And if you go to a restaurant, you may ask for un menú. But if you have a big family, you may need multiple menús. Simple enough. The next rule is that if la terminación, the ending, ends in a consonant, that is, any letter that's not a vowel, any letter that's not A, E, I, O, or U, we should add ES. So, maybe you fall in love once and you have one amor in your life, but then they get away and you go on a date again and you find a new amor. In your life, you have had multiple amores, multiple loves. Perhaps one land has a king, a rey, but then a warring kingdom comes into play, and now we're dealing with multiple reyes, multiple kings. And perhaps you keep a clock next to your bed, an alarm clock, so that it'll go off and you can wake up in the morning. But maybe it would be a good idea for you to set multiple relojes with an alarm, just in case one doesn't work. All right, so this is the general rule for making words plural, and this will get you most of the way in Spanish. Almost all words end in, well, a vowel or a consonant. They have to. Those are the only two options. But sometimes there are some very strange and highly specific situations where something just a little bit different happens, okay? So if the terminación ends in N or S, okay, which is a consonant, so we're still going to be adding ES, and right before that N or S is an accented vowel. In other words, if the terminación is an accented vowel, such as this O with an accent, or this E with an accent, or this U with an accent, and then it's immediately followed by an N or an S. So here, this O is immediately followed by an N, this one is immediately followed by an S, and this one's immediately followed by an S. If we have this situation with an accented vowel and then immediately an N or an S, we're still going to follow the rule of adding ES because the ending is a consonant. So we'll go ahead and do that. We have canciones, we have intereses, and we have autobuses. But in this specific situation, we also need to remove the accent. Let's see if I can pick a color. Will it let me? I don't think it will. We are just going to scribble it out. So pretend like the accent isn't even there. Pardon my low video quality. All right. So in summary, we still do the same thing. We add an ES, but in this specific situation with an accented vowel and then an N, or an accented vowel and then an S, we also have to get rid of that accent. Another specific situation is if the terminación is the letter zeta, we also have to change the Z to a C. So let me look at this word. It ends in a Z, which I know from the earlier rule is a consonant, so the way that I can make it plural is by adding ES. But because of this specific rule, oh no, I also have to change the Z to a C. No, it doesn't want to work. What is happening? Well, pardon this weird thing that the pen is doing. I don't know what's going on. So instead of pez, P-E-Z-E-S, peces, we're changing that Z to a C, and it becomes peces. All right. We will not let technical difficulties get us down. All right, and finally, if the ending la terminación is a non-accented vowel immediately followed by an S. So for example, here we have the letter E, but it's, I'm not on my pen anymore. Here we have the letter E, but it's not accented. Here we have the letter E, not accented. Here we have the letter O, not accented. Here we have the letter A, not accented. So these are non-accented vowels, and then they're followed by an S. To make them plural, we do nothing. So lunes means Monday, but lunes also means Mondays. So if I want to say, on Monday I'm going to the bank, I would say el lunes voy al banco. But if I want to say every Monday I go to the bank, on Mondays I go to the bank, I would say los lunes, same, voy al banco. Nothing changes. So that's it. That's how to make a sustantivo, a noun, plural in Spanish. All right, on to part 2. So now that we know what a sustantivo is and we know how to make it plural if we want it to be plural, it's time to learn an important grammatical rule in Spanish, which is, in Spanish, a noun, a sustantivo, almost always, and I mean even more than in English, almost always needs to be introduced by one of these 3 things: an article, a possessive pronoun, or an adjective of quantity. What do I mean by it needs to be introduced by that word? Well, I mean, if you're using a noun when you're speaking, when you're writing, if you're referring to any person, place, thing, or idea, and you use a word that's a noun, one of these has to come before it, almost always. There's a small list of exceptions over here, which I will zoom in upon to show you, in case you're interested. These are the only situations in which this isn't true. But for the most part, you need to have one of these 3 things before every noun that you use, okay? Even if you don't use one in English, and we'll go over that. So the first category, and this is what we're focusing on this week, we'll get to possessive pronouns and adjectives of quantity later on during this year. But what we're focusing on right now is articles. In Spanish, these are called artículos. It's a cognado. It looks just the same. So an artículo, or an article, is one way we can introduce a noun. We have definite articles and indefinite articles, 2 types of articles. Here's the difference. A definite article is used to introduce things if specificity is important. So here's an example. The phone is ringing. If I say the phone is ringing, you know I'm referring to a specific phone, not just any phone, right? The phone is ringing. Clearly, I want you to pick up a specific phone, right? An indefinite article is used to introduce things if specificity isn't important. So if I say, some phones are ringing, it's like, okay, so what? Which ones? We don't know. I don't know. Just some phones are ringing, right? So we have these in English too. Our definite article in English is the word the. So you could say that these 4 words, el, la, los, and las, translate to the in English. That is one possibility. We also have the words a, an, and some, or a, an, and some in English that we use as our indefinite articles. We use these words to say that something, the specificity isn't important, okay? So for example, in English, if I say, do you have a pen, or do you have a pen, I'm using a as an indefinite article. I'm saying, I don't care which specific pen you have. I don't care what the brand is, just do you have a pen? Because I need a pen, right? The specificity isn't important. So that's the main difference here between a definite and an indefinite article. You will need to know this. You will be quizzed on the difference between a definite and an indefinite article. So, in summary, a definite article is used when the specificity is important, the specific item or the specific person is important. Indefinite is just this like, it doesn't matter which one necessarily. We're just talking about something, right? All right. So the definite article in English is the word the. The indefinite articles in English are an, and some. And these are the definite articles in Spanish. El, la, los, and las. These are the indefinite words, or indefinite articles in Spanish. Un, una, unos, unas. You may notice that they are sorted into blue and pink, and that is because these blue words can be used in front of masculine nouns, and these pink words can be used in front of feminine nouns. Earlier we learned how to look at the ending, that specific part of a noun, to be able to tell its gender in Spanish. So now I'm telling you that when we put an article in front of a noun, right, because all nouns in Spanish need to be introduced by either an article or one of these other two things, right, that if we put an article in front of a noun in Spanish, it has to match gender. So, for example, if I want to talk about pens, right? I know that bolígrafo, I know from looking at the ending of it that bolígrafo, pen, is masculine. And so the word that I use with bolígrafo also has to be masculine. Gender isn't the only thing that has to match. The other item that has to match is the number. So notice here, móvil is a masculine word. It doesn't have an ending that tells us, it doesn't have a part at the end that tells us the gender, so we just have to know that móvil is masculine. But we know that móvil is masculine, and so we have to use el with móvil, because el is a singular definite article. It can be used to refer to one thing. Los, however, is a plural definite article. We can use it to refer to multiple items. So I would say el móvil to say the phone, because it's only one of them. But over here I'm talking about multiple pens, los bolígrafos. And so I can't say el bolígrafo even though they match in gender, because they also have to match in number, los bolígrafos. The same is true for the feminine. La is the singular article, and las is the plural article. So let's look at this example. I go to school. In the sentence, I go to school, in English, we don't use an article because we don't always need to put something before nouns in English. We just say, I go to school. School is a noun. It refers to a place, right? Person, place, or thing. Since it's a noun, in Spanish, we know that nouns have to be preceded. They have to be introduced by some type of word on this list. And in this case, we're using a definite article because a definite article is used if specificity is important. I don't want to say I go to just any school. I know that I go to a specific school, and it matters which school I go to, because if I pull up at the wrong school on Monday morning, I'll be marked absent at my real school, right? So I know that I need to use a definite article, one of these four. And since escuela is singular and feminine, since it ends in the letter A, I know that I can choose the singular feminine article, la, to put before escuela. So voy a la escuela, I go to school. Muy bien. All right. The same rule applies with indefinite articles. Remember, indefinite are what we're using if specificity is not important, okay? So I will use un or una if I'm talking about something singular, and unos or unas if I'm talking about something plural. For example, here I'm talking about multiple schools, so I can say unas escuelas, because escuela is feminine, and then we made it plural by adding an S, since it ends in a vowel. So we have escuela, which is feminine and plural, and we're going to introduce it with unas, which is also feminine and plural. Now, why did I use the indefinite article instead of the definite article? Well, let's read. There are some schools in Toledo. Am I referring to any specific schools? No, not really. It's not important. I just want you to know that there are some schools in Toledo. Maybe you're worried that your kids will move to Toledo, which is the middle of nowhere in the middle of a cornfield, and won't have an education. And I can tell you, no, there are some schools in Toledo. I don't know exactly the names of all of them. I'm not being very specific, but there are some schools. So we'll use this indefinite article. All right. So that is articles for you. If you're interested in reading further to learn about possessive pronouns, you may, but this is something that we will focus on later during our family unit. If you're interested in adjectives of quantity, most of these, besides numbers, we're actually going to learn in Spanish too, but feel free to look ahead if you think these might be useful and to take notes on them. Thanks for your attention, and good luck with our practice activity.